Hi, I'm Tim, he's Brian. Welcome back to WatchBox and thanks for logging on. We are the team with the theme and today's theme is alternative time displays. Before we jump into that, Brian, let's do a wrist check.
Okay, so today I am wearing a titanium Octasport. So this is the current version of the watch, 44 millimeters in dimension, ceramic bezel, all titanium bracelet. You'll notice that it does not have the rubber inserts, which is in line with the current styling of the watch. What makes this watch unique is a bright blue dial that actually changes color in the light, so it seems darker in some lights and a little bit lighter blue in others. This was a small edition made for us and some of our clients, and a watch that I very much enjoy wearing.
As you can see, all titanium with the exception of the movement, which is aluminum. Bridges and plates in aluminum, a cool techno-industrial look, all grayscale, very light, and I should mention, the rated at 5 days of power reserve, it'll run for almost 7. A very slick blue lacquer dial with lovely smoked sapphire featuring red accents. You've got the double-digit date, you've got the AM/PM indicator, you've got the power reserve indicator, and then the individual numerals are solid blocks of luminova. We don't yet have the tech to do lume shots on this show, but we're working on it. Nice piece.
Thank you.
All right, now let's take a quick look for those of you who may be new to the program. This is my Zinn EZM 1.1. 500-piece limited edition for 2017. It was a tribute to a 40mm titanium watch made in the 90s for the German Federal Customs Enforcement Service. So this timepiece, of course, a little bit larger at 43mm and made out of steel instead of tie, but it is the carburized, hardened, tegamented, scratch-resistant steel. There's a little copper sulfate capsule on the side that pulls humidity out of the watch should any manage to enter. You can see the bezel is fixed by screws, captive style, for more robust assembly. It is a lefty because it's easier to actuate the chronograph with your thumb rather than your forefinger. And then you've got the bidirectional rotating timing bezel. So while the chronograph counts up with central register minutes, the bezel actually counts down. Fun piece to own, very cool. But we have cooler watches on the table today, and we're going to start with one of Brian's. Brian, which alternative time display do you want to pick first?
So we're going to start with the Pallweber, I think keeping in line with the blue lacquer dials. So Pallweber was an Austrian engineer who was known for producing jump hour minutes and jump hour hours pocket watches, to which he licensed to IWC. So for IWC's 150th anniversary, they produced this watch in 2 different iterations with a blue dial and with a white dial in a limited edition of 500 pieces. So here we have what I would consider the more desirable blue lacquer dial. You've got the jump hours on top with the jump minutes right below it. Again, straightforward. To me, this was a banner year for IWC in terms of the watches that they produced. The other highlight of that year was the Portuguese Chronograph featuring both the blue lacquer dial and the white lacquer dial, but it was also the first year that the Portuguese featured the sapphire crystal case back with the in-house movement.
Yes, this is an interesting watch because on the dial side, it is supposed to emulate a 19th century Pallweber pocket watches built by IWC. So they have a 12-layer hand-finished lacquered dial. There are clear layers, there are blue layers. They're sort of interspersed in a sandwich pattern with each one hand-buffed before the next was applied. The timepiece, you'll note, is also part of no recognizable IWC model line. It's not a Portuguese Portofino Pilot Ingenieur. This is, truthfully, a standalone model built specifically for the anniversary, and in that regard, it is absolutely unique and one of the best special editions of recent years. Now, when you turn it over, the 94-200 movement is fascinating because it has 2 separate barrels, 2 separate drivetrains, and then the train that drives the seconds is actually separate from the train that drives the minutes. So how do you get it to jump? And how do you synchronize the seconds to the minutes if they're not actually driven by the same drivetrain or barrel? Well, there is a coupling system at the center that actually links the minutes and the seconds every 60 seconds in order to jump the minutes when the seconds hand reaches the index. Free sprung, it is a overcoil hairspring made by hand, artisanally regulated in 5 positions, an impressive timepiece with a power reserve over 50 hours, which means it significantly surpasses the well-known Lange Zeitwerk in the segment. Real cool piece. I'll throw it on the wrist, you get a sense of it. You can see why the timepiece doesn't wear anything like a 45mm watch. It's almost like a wire lug Radiomir. And you know, again, you do only have to wind it once every other day because of the 60 hours of reserve, so that lovely onion-style crown will go unused once every other day, but it's the kind of thing you love to wind because, like the Zeitwerk, the mainsprings are so powerful and torquey that the feel of the wind is half the fun of the watch. And the look of the timepiece, again, absolutely unique. It's not a Portuguese or a Portofino. I would love to see IWC keep that movement in the collection, but at this point, it's almost a bespoke movement and a bespoke dial and a bespoke case. And from Richemont, that's a rarity because they love to iterate. We love them all the same. Okay. Now we'll talk about one of my watches here. Not my watch personally, but one of our WatchBox watches, and a great piece. From the 2000s, this is the Breitling Aerospace, titanium 42 millimeters, and this is what a real pilot would wear. If you wanted to use a watch for aviation and really rely on it in the modern era, you want something like this, not a Navitimer. So what you have here is a 100-meter water-resistant case. You have a unidirectional rotating dive-style bezel. You have an analog and digital display, and I'm going to show you how that works. You can hide the digital. You can bring the digital back. You can scroll through your various functions. It has a second time zone. It has a chronograph. It has a perpetual calendar. It also has an alarm and a countdown timer. The alarm goes off at a specific time of day. The countdown timer can be programmed to go off after a certain period has elapsed. Now you can see it also features a double scroll digital display. So this is a very unusual look for a modern luxury watch, but it's particularly apropos because on the digital display you have a backlight, meaning any of the subsidiary functions can be entirely backlit if you need to access them at night, such as time remaining on your countdown, the perpetual calendar, the second time zone, the chronograph elapsed time. All of that is accessible using the backlight system. Now the watch also includes a thermocompensated super quartz movement that's accurate to about 10 seconds per year, and it's a very rare COSC certified quartz chronometer, which means you're talking about exceptional accuracy, just short of an atomic clock, but solidly in the range you associate with something like a Grand Seiko 9F. And it has another fun feature. If you don't quite have the time to glance down at your wrist, or you can't quite see the glow at night, there is a minute repeater that will chime the time, and conveniently, this one is just short of 12 o'clock. Oh no, don't do this to me. It turned over. Oh well. Let me put it back in repeating mode. Okay, so there you go right there. It is a fun watch to wear, an easy watch on the wrist, all in titanium with a matching titanium Professional 2 bracelet. It's a cool piece that bucks the trend with aviators' watches in that it's not ungodly huge, and unlike most aviation watches, which are 30 to 60 meters water resistant, this analog digital is 100 meters, so this is a real swimmable watch if you do happen to be that seaplane pilot. Now, you're actually an aerospace owner.
Yeah, so, as an aerospace owner, I always loved the combination of the analog display with the digital, and I think that it's very hard to accomplish creating a modern luxury watch in terms of appearance, but then also having those new technology elements which they have. So, the Aerospace line has been out for a while. I always loved how they executed it. I think that the watch serves a large grouping of people, those that maybe want something that's quartz ultra accurate. They don't have to worry about setting the watch or winding it, while at the same time not having that feeling that they're wearing a less expensive or call it cheaper quartz watch. So to me, Breitling hit it out of the park when they came out with this watch, and I'm a much bigger fan of this combination of, call it watchmaking technology, luxury watch, than I am of the more modern day luxury watches that feature maybe an all Android operating system.
And it's a lot of fun because it goes years between battery replacements. It always keeps the time correctly. The calendar is perpetual and comprehensive. And between the second time zone, the alarm, the countdown timer, the chronograph, the analog digital, the backlight, the accuracy, and the swimmability, it really is a do-it-all watch. For those who want a more rugged watch, but you don't want to slum it with a G-Shock or a Timex Ironman, nothing wrong with those. But you also don't want a disposable product like, for example, an Apple Apple Watch that really can't get wet to the same degree this can. This is a way to own a luxury product that's lifetime serviceable, because we still see the originals from 1985 and they still work well. It just gives you a more robust package and a lot of features that would ordinarily force you to bust out a phone. Okay, so Hautlence or FP?
Let's go with the Hautlence. We can end with the FP. So keeping in that alternative display vein, here we have a Hautlence. So Hautlence, founded in 2004, located in Neuchatel, where we actually have an office. Hautlence is an independent brand that is actually known for making alternative display watches. So in their heyday, I would say, or not necessarily heyday, but they were producing these types of watches in the heyday of alternative display back in the mid-2000s, where you had brands like Hautlence, MB&F, call it rewriting how a modern watch should look. So here you have a jump hour with retrograde minutes. You've got a date display there at 7 o'clock. And again, just very modern in appearance, industrial in design, 88-piece limited edition, 44mm titanium case. You know, when you think Hautlence, you know, to me, if you know about the brand, this is what comes to mind.
It's really cool because there's a spring-loaded push rod that actuates the retrograde minute, and then you've got that orbital jumping hour. But this being the HLQ quantième, you also have the calendar down at about 7 o'clock, like Brian mentioned. There's a pusher up at 12 that actuates the date separately. Their movements are in-house. The case is 44mm in titanium. It's a manufacturer movement. It's an 88-piece limited edition, and it's not as big as you would suspect for a 44, because again, a little bit like the tribute to Pallweber, you've got these spare lugs that are tiny in relation to the case. So even though my wrist is 16 centimeters, you can see the watch is not super thick for a compound complication, and it's easy to wear because it's not broad across the wrist. In grade 5 titanium, it's really light. It also has a fascinating and distinctive case. As you can see, the lug structure, as well as the structure flanking the crown, it's all modular, so if you really gnash it badly, it can be replaced during service. They can take out the lug and put in a new lug. It's a lot of fun to operate these. I'm gonna be honest, they're very expensive when new, and they're great pre-owned buys, and watches like this really illustrate the value of pre-owned. You can get something absolutely prohibitive on the new market for very reasonable money, and we're really only talking like high-end Rolex money with this type of watch. So a lot of fascinating mechanics, in-house savoir-faire, original engineering, fascinating display, and frankly rarity, as this is a company that only makes a few hundred pieces per year. The name Hautlence, anagram for Neuchatel, so they're very grounded in the area where they're located. And they're actually a sister company to H. Moser & C. They're owned by the same firm, MELB Holdings. So while the company is small, the parent is fairly large, and they're on a firm financial footing. I know a lot of people ask about that when they see used independent brand watches.
Right, for servicing needs in the future.
Exactly. Yeah. They're around. You can even have custom stuff done. Not to the same extent, though, as this guy right here. This is my Grail Watch, and that's saying something because you guys know that I have a broad overview of the watch market, and I've seen just about everything. So when I say this is the definitive Grail, I speak from the experience born of 5,000 watch reviews. This is the one that stood out. Originally launched in 2014, this is the DB28 Digital, 45mm in grade 5 titanium. It features the DB28's famous floating lugs, variable geometry, and there are 3 different sizes of lug they can put on at the factory. These are actually the large lugs. The dial is exceptional. Obviously, it's a jump hour. That goes without saying. Easy to miss, however, and I'm going to get as close as I can, Andrew, is the spherical moon phase display at the center of the dial. It's surrounded by a blue fired titanium ring representing the cosmos with little applique white gold stars, and then you can see that there is a sphere that is 1/2 blued steel and 1/2 white palladium, and it has an adjustment interval of over 1,000 years. That same combination of fired blue titanium with applied white gold stars, that is the scroll against which you can read the minutes ring. So there's a little index. You can see we are just past 50, so it's just past 50 at the index at 12. And so this timepiece is not just a jump hour, scrolling minute, and moon phase, but it has a lovely silver Grand Orge or barleycorn guilloche cut. And this is the real thing done on a rose lathe. De Bethune makes its own movements, but it also makes its own dials and its own cases. So everything you see here was done in L'Aubusson at the manufacturer. The case back is spectacular, and I'm sorry about my smudges on here. It's usually a bit more comely, but you can see everything that makes this company great. How many patents are we looking at? Let's count. Well, there was the patent for the blued titanium, the twin self-adjusting mainspring barrels, the triple parachute shock protection system, the bi-element dogleg hairspring, and the white gold and silicon disc balance wheel. It is a full disc of silicon with a white gold rim. All of those components and processes and systems I just mentioned are patented. This is a company that has over 30 manufacturer movements, despite the fact that it's only been around since 2002. Twin barrels, 5-day power reserve, manual wind, full balance bridge, fired and black polished, so it's blue and mirrored. And then you've got 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs on top of that delta-shaped barrel bridge. We have the upper portion of the spring, which has also been blued. Now you can see Côte de Betoune, that they reverse the wheel that lays down the strakes, the waves, and you can see that they're actually darker outboard on both sides because they reverse the wheel on each side of the movement while doing the decoration. Mirrored anglage, it goes without saying. A $100,000 watch buys you some fine finish, not just haute de gamme engineering, haute de gamme execution. So while the watch looks wild and futuristic, the case back exhibits the most traditional of finish executed at the highest level. A truly special watch. Please buy this before I do. I know that's not exactly COVID safe, kissing the watch through my mask, but whatever. It's worth the risk. Okay, we're going to finish with a big piece and easily the most animated watch on the table.
Correct. So here we have the Vagabondage III by Fp Jorn. So this is the iteration in rose gold. It was the third of the Vagabondage series. Each one another adaptation of alternative display. The first being a jump hour, the second being a jump hour with jump minutes, and now the third being a jump hour with jump seconds. So as you can see, the watch itself has a jump second movement proprietary to Fp Jorn, his own invention, where the seconds are jumping obviously every second. So the watch is just spectacular. He's the only one that's ever been able to accomplish this function. And I believe it did take him years of R&D in order to get it just right in order for it to work. So they also produced another series in platinum, and you know, just a fantastic watch. And for me, any show that was going to have alternative time display had to feature one of the Vagabondage series.
We are fortunate as we see the Vagabondage series on a fairly regular basis here at WatchBox, and that's really saying something when you consider the low absolute production numbers. Consider that this series was made in 68 pieces rose gold and 69 pieces platinum, so the platinum is actually a little bit more common than this rose gold model. That was also true of the Vagabondage II, and the Vagabondage I was fascinating in that it was only ever built in platinum, but also I believe there was a white gold example and there was a yellow gold example, which might be the only yellow gold Fp Jorn wristwatch. I'm not sure if we're counting the Journe Society straw gold as yellow gold, but that was a rare piece, and it actually explains, if we go back to that first Vagabondage, which was created originally as an auction piece for the anniversary of the auction house Antiquorum, that original watch was powered by a movement that Fp Jorn had originally designed for a Cartier Tour II. Well, that watch didn't happen, so he bought back the rights to the movement, and the movement was essentially shaped like a Cartier Tour II. So that dictated the shape of the Vagabondage series. You'll also note that there's no branding on the dial. It doesn't say Fp Jorn, it doesn't say the model. Now that's present on the case back, make no mistake, but on that first Vagabondage, which featured an orbital jumping hour, he didn't want to put his name on it because he didn't feel that it was quite chronometer accurate. That changed with the V2 and the V3, but he maintained the tradition of the unadorned dial. There's a smoked sapphire over the center, and then you've got the rose gold base plate of the movement underneath. You've got jumping hours, jumping seconds, and then a orbital scrolling minutes display with a power reserve. Turn it all over and you can see, as ever, it is a properly shaped and sized movement. Manual wind beaten away at 21.6. And despite the fact that this is not a big watch, it does feel hefty with the rose gold case, the rose gold movement, an accessory you rarely see on Journe watches in the deployant clasp. There's also a wonderful proportion here, as the timepiece is only about 37.5 millimeters wide, about 45 millimeters from lug to lug, and then about 8 millimeters thick. So it's a really compact piece for the complexity that lies within. And I've always said that if there's one thing I really admire about Fp Jorn as an engineer, it's his ability to package a watch. As some of his most spectacular achievements in resonance, tourbillon chronometry, jumping hours, minutes, and seconds. He's managed to do it all in fairly small cases.
And you know, one of the other really interesting facts, or that I find about this watch, is number one, the way that he distributed the Vagabondage III was that as one is numbered to 68 pieces, one is numbered to 69, you were offered the same number if you had the number 2. So if you had the Vagabondage II, whichever number it may be, whether it was, call it platinum or rose, you were offered that same number in the 3, which to me was a really great way of connecting that customer, because the other version came out years before, with the current one. And also the fact that he'll come out with a watch that's as groundbreaking as this, with as much R&D that goes into it as this, and only produce the one edition. You won't find the movement being utilized again anywhere else. It's not like let's call it, like a group brand that may come out with a movement like this and then it's carried over for years. This is a example of a watch that he produced, and that's just why he's a purist, right? He came out with the watch, he launched it, he sold it, and now it's done.
And the nice thing is, there are 3 Vagabondage watches, but they each has its individual identity, and though they're similar in shape and size, all 3 movements are unique. The watches are nothing alike in terms of function and display. So although there are 3 Vagabondage models, they're spread from 2005 to 2017, and each one was completely distinct. Whereas if a series like that had been issued by a major group brand, it would have been like 3 consecutive model years, not 12. And it's a wonderful series because if you are a collector of Fp Jorn, collecting all 3 is like a Grail level goal. And if you just want to own one Fp Jorn, and maybe you want something that's different than the rest, the Vagabondage series is so distinct in look that it could never be confused with the Souverain, the Octa. It's different from the line Sports, and I think that's one of its great strengths. It stands alone. It is completely distinct. It is its own separate collection theme. If you want, your only Fp Jorn could be a Vagabondage, and it would be like owning a Mare Nostrum from Panerai. In a brand where there is sort of a house look, this is the exception.
And I love the movement on the dial. I'm a big fan of when I'm looking down at a watch that I see activity or movement. The watch itself has a life of its own, and for me it's just super special to just be able to look at it. One of the only drawbacks of another watch I own, the 5980, is that there's no movement on the dial, and it's one of the few lingering things that's always bothered me about the reference. But that being said, when you watch this watch in action, it's truly special. Honestly, that it doesn't break. Like, the fact that it works to me is just amazing.
Yeah, Vianney Halter tried the jumping seconds thing back in the 2000s. It didn't work out well with the Opus 3. But look how well indexed this is. It jumps right at the turn. I mean, it's perfect. It's the full package. It's reliable, it's innovative, ergonomically excellent, it's rare, it's an investment watch, it's from a great brand, it's a breakthrough product. I'd still rather have this, though. Honestly, that would be my choice. But then again, I'm the weird guy. This is going to be the favorite for the guy who wants to own a milestone and a landmark. This is going to be for the guy who's a little bit wild and wacky. Okay, Brian, how do people reach us if they're interested in these watches?
So they can either reach out to social@thewatchbox.com, they can reach out to you directly on Instagram, they can reach out to me directly on Instagram. Feel free if you have any questions about any of these watches. You can also ask questions in the comments, to which we will respond to any questions and also reach out.
And team also at thewatchbox.com. It's a real quick address we've got if you want to reach out regarding any of these watches or watches you see on the channel. Thanks so much. I'm Tim, he's Brian. Time out, and thanks for logging on.